Take my hand. I'll lead you into death. By A Whisper in the Shadows on AO3. Episode 13. Chapter 7. He glanced at the detective, who had a hand over his mouth, staring at the boy with an unreadable look. How long did you say this kid was missing for? Shouta murmured. Tsukauchi glanced at him briefly, before focusing back on the boy. Ah. His voice caught and cleared his throat. It would be 11 years in December. Well, fuck. Over 10 years. If he was 17, like Bakugou, that would mean he was taken when he was just 7 years old. What kind of hell did this kid go through to become what he was? Shota's back straightened as the thought suddenly hit him. Tsukauchi, how long has the Grim Reaper been in operation? He asked slowly, the detective grimaced, swallowing hard. Well, as you know, we've been on the case for 3 years, which is his estimate time in Japan. Commission Worldwide believes he's operated as sort of a global freelancer for 2 years before that. Shouta stared in horror at the detective. You mean to tell me Weaver started when that boy was only, what, 11? 12? A curt nod was all that was given as an answer. Kami. Shouta couldn't believe what he was hearing. The boy. The longer he looked at him, the more concerning everything became. It's not like they hadn't dealt with child villains in the past. It just made their job a lot harder. Toga was one of the most concerning, but she was long past saving. Shigaraki himself was only a few years older than his class. Though both were stunning by society, which forced them down their paths, they were still believed in what they were doing. This kid, until he started speaking, told his story. There was no knowing what was going on in his mind. There was something, though. Something in the kid's eyes. The way he held himself. They were covered in scars. It was the costume of the most deadly assassin in the world. Nothing about this child screamed villain. Everyone was quiet in the room, apart from Bakugou and Hizashi. Eventually, his tears stopped, and his breathing evened out. All Shouta could do was stare at Midoriya, who still had yet to look up, who had barely moved at all from his curled position on the table. He had footsteps behind him. I want to go in to talk to him. Bakugou's voice croaked. Tsukauchi hesitated. Shouta understood why. He was Reaper's last victim, after all. And now, with the assassin's true identity being his childhood friend, adding more complications. Shouta wasn't inclined to let him in either. On the other hand, their relationship could seriously help break through the kid. Please. Bakugou practically begged when the two men didn't answer right away. Tsukauchi looked at Shouta, who gave a small nod as permission. The detective rubbed at his eyes. Okay, he said, nodding slowly. Okay, but I'm going in first, all right? And if there's even a sliver of anything looking like foul play, you're out. No arguments. Understood? Bakugou gave a small nod. Okay. Good, all right. The detective gestured for Shouta to follow him, and they both made their way back into the room. Though Midoriya still didn't look up, his shoulders stiffened slightly at the sound of Tsukauchi pulling the chair across from him. He gave a slight cough before speaking. Midoriya Izuku. The boy tensed even more. The voice you heard a moment ago is that of Bakugou Katsuki. You knew each other when you were younger. He was also your final target. He will be coming into the room in a moment. Do you understand? The detective got no response. No reaction, but the young boy continued to stare at the table, body rigid. Tsukauchi sighed before looking to Shouta, and nodding, slightly, lifting himself from the seat. Shouta looked back at the mirror, giving his own nod. The door opened, and Bakugou walked in slowly, eyes not leaving his childhood friend. Both hero and detective tensed immediately at the sudden reaction from the green-haired boy. His head shot up, eyes following Bakugou's movements. He made no attempt to attack or move himself, so the two men relaxed slightly, though they remained alert and ready. Bakugou was hesitant in his steps, making his way to sit across Midoriya, the other boy's eyes on him constantly. They stared at each other in silence, before Bakugou spoke. Hi, Izuku. He croaked. voice becoming harsh. Midoriya's eyes twitched slightly, but he gave to no other acknowledgement. Shouta felt his heart breaking for his student. The entire situation was completely and utterly messed up. None of them were sure how to approach. I'm Katsuki, but you know that. Because we told you. Did you, could you? The blonde let out a growl of frustration. Shouta stepped forward to place a, hopefully, comforting hand on his shoulder. Interestingly, Midoriya's eyes flicked down to it before looking back to Bakugou's. The blonde took a couple steadying breaths before continuing. Look, I don't know what's going on with you, or what happened the last number of years, but I know you. Or at least the you used to be. And Kami, I really need you to start answering some questions, Izuku, because whatever happened to you, the Izuku I fucking know isn't so psycho killer, okay? Shouta squeezed the kid's shoulder. He was beginning to sound desperate, panicky. But they don't know that, okay? So they're gonna fucking put you away in the deepest hole in Tartarus if we don't figure this out. And I won't lose you again, so please, Izuku, please help us to fucking help you. I need you to wake up. I need you to come back to me. He paused, as if thinking something over. Back to your kachan. None of them were expecting all hell to break loose. Both men whipped their heads to the blonde as a childish nickname from the card sprung from his lips. Their attention was immediately brought back to Midoriya, who went rimrod, straight in his chair. His eyes were blown wide. Teeth clenched as he gripped the table in front of him, knuckles white. His entire body was completely stiff before he collapsed in his seat, shaking severely. Bakugou stood up, his chair flying up behind him. Izuku! He moved forward and shook the boy. But Shouta's hero training finally kicked in, pushing through the shock. He shot his capture scarf weapon, practically throwing the blonde to the door. Get him out of here, fat gum. The other hero was already waiting by the door, pulling the protesting blonde with him as officers rushed in with Hizashi. Shouta moved back to Sakauchi, who was crouched next to the shaking boy. Seizure? He asked, though he didn't think it to be the case. The detective seemed to agree, shaking his head slightly, as he leaned the boy's weight on him. Not sure. He grunted. Then there were whines and groans coming from Midoriya, as his head lolled onto the man's shoulder. It was then Shouta noticed the blood coming from his ears and nose. The green-haired child gave a high-pitched whine before his eyes rolled back into the back of his head. Shit. I don't think this is a seizure, but better safe than sorry. He gasped out before turning to the other officers. Give me the key to his cuff. The officers hesitated, staring at the assassin with uncertainty and a little fear. One of them looked as though he were going to protest when Midoriya shot fast forward, gasping for air, whimpering before collapsing back onto the detective again. Shouta understood their fear. But a child was in pain and possibly having a seizure, and he was not going to stand back and watch it happen, no matter what he had done in his past. Either help us or get out, but give us the goddamn keys. A child is in pain, and we do not need you hovering uselessly. Keys, now. He snapped with force. The two officers hesitated only for a second longer before coming over to help. Hizashi was already behind the boy, keeping his head from snapping back. They got the cuffs undone and gently lowered him to the ground, putting him into the recovery position. He was sweating and still shaking, but not as harshly. He panted sounds had diminished into the occasional whimper. Shouta sat back onto his hunches, staring at the boy before looking back at the door. The number one hero stood, watching the scene intently. Behind him, Fat Gum was keeping Bakugou in place, while his head hung low in his defeat. The hero was speaking lowly to him, so low Shouta couldn't even hear a murmur, though he kept glancing worrying at the scene. Shouta looked back at the young boy, who had stopped shaking and seemed to have passed out. Asleep like this. He looked so young, so vulnerable. The scars the only retainable of his innocence. Shouta sighed heavily. This was going to get a whole lot more complicated. Reaper lay on his side in the cell. They had left him alone a number of hours ago. It was dark in the cell, and Reaper couldn't sleep. He really didn't like the dark. Reaper. The Grim Reaper. Izuku. Izuku Midoriya. That was his name. It sounded familiar, especially from the blonde, but also strange, like he should have been calling him something else. Bakugou Katsuki also sounded strange and familiar, but Izuku knew what he was supposed to be called. Kachan. His neck tinged. He rolled the key in his palm. The guards had gone too close earlier, and Izuku managed to snatch it. Not to escape. He didn't want to escape. Part of him knew he needed to get back to where he belonged. Back to Papa. There was another part, though, that screamed at him not to run, that told him that he was already where he belonged. He felt bad, disobedient. But he didn't want to go back to Papa. He wanted to stay here. He wanted to see Bakugou again. Kachan. The chip in Izuku's nerves never felt so heavy. He usually forgot it was there, though he remembered when they put it. They didn't give him anything to numb the pain. Papa said it was so he could remember his place, remember who owned him. Izuku didn't want the chip there anymore. He didn't want to belong to Papa, though he knew, even without it, he would never forget to be Papa's property. He sat up on the cot, slowly, looking at the key. It wasn't that sharp, so this was gonna hurt a lot, but Izuku didn't care. Carefully, he brought the key to his back of his neck, where he knew the chip lay under his skin. He only hesitated a moment before he pushed the key down, shredding his skin open. He gritted his teeth as the pain hit, pushing through it and ignoring the cold sensation flowing down his neck. He was getting desperate, pushing down harder in an attempt to get the chip. He bit down hard on his lip to stop the pain sounds from coming out. He knew he was bleeding a lot, but he didn't care. He wanted the chip gone. His vision was getting splotchy as he finally felt it. He ripped it out, hard, dropping to the floor with a shout of pain. The world swirled around him as he lay, cheeks pressed hard to the cold ground. He just about registered the sounds of shouting as the guards came. The last thing he remembered was being lifted, the tired eyes of the detective from earlier peering down at him in concern. Then everything went dark. Oh my god. That's all I have to say. Just, oh my god. I hope that Izuku is actually going to get the help he needs. I also hope that the chip cannot be tracking him. What does the chip do? I'm concerned. The next one is also going to probably be split up into two. Chapter 8. Beep, beep, beep. Sterile, cold, bright. Beep, beep, beep. Where was he? I think we start with Izuku's point of view, and not Bakugou's. Okay, now, we are finally going up, but as that famous tag always says, it gets worse before it gets better. Because the sad thing about healing is, I don't know if you've ever seen those videos where it's showing murky water, and to heal it, you have to put it underneath a running sink. And it's not like you dump out all that murky water and all of a sudden you have clean water. You have to work through that clean water. And not only do you have to work through that dirty water, that dirty water has to slowly be spilled as clean water is put inside. Well, sometimes, obviously healing is not so linear like that. It's a way to show it that's a little more understanding for people. It's a visual show. A great way to show what true healing could be like is doing that while sometimes that faucet starts running dirty water inside. Sometimes the dirty water comes out of nowhere. Sometimes the faucet stops running. That is healing. That cup. Putting it back with clean water when sometimes you do not have access to clean water. Sometimes you don't have access to water at all. Sometimes your water becomes dirty again. And obviously something so traumatic like this is going to take a lot of therapy, a lot of underwriting. I don't think you understand. If Izuku was taken at the age of goddamn 7 and has been under this person's finger for 10 years. Not only is that 10 years of psychological training to train Izuku into being this perfect puppet that this person needs and wants. Or not needs and wants, but just wants Izuku to become. It was made and it was done while Izuku was going through his crucial years. And I mean his crucial years, his child developmental years, where he is developing a sense of self, a sense of others, a sense of a bunch of things, a sense of who he wants to be, a sense of who he's gonna be, where all his coding is, think of it this way, your brain does not fully develop till the age of 25, meaning things you do get reinforced. It's why it is easier for kids to learn languages and learn instruments and learn a bunch of things when they're little than it is for an adult to do this. Why? Because think of it this way. Think of your neurons. That is the brain cells in your, or not the brain cells, but yeah, neurons. That is a thing that is sending wavelengths through your brain that makes you open and close your hand. The same wavelengths that indirectly, without you consciously knowing, sends links to the rest of your body to have your heart pump, to have you breathing. The same wavelengths that make you think and feel, right? Those, when reinforced, get this white little layer all over it, right? That makes it faster, stronger, more resilience. So, think of it this way. You're always told to pick up your room at 8 since you were a little kid. At 8 p.m., you clean your room and you sleep. At 8 a.m., you clean your room and you sleep. So what happens? Those little pathway neurons are being reinforced and reinforced and reinforced. And so that white member goes over it, making it faster and stronger. So that becomes part of your coding. You are now a person who sleeps at 8, cleans at 8. That is who you are. Fundamentally, it is who you are. You as a child, it's why it is super important for parents to keep this in mind a lot. It is who you are. And, in fact, you learn a lot more and you are more coded in your brain. And more coding comes into your brain when trauma is induced. Right? Not just physical trauma, but let's say in moments of stress, in moments of high adrenaline, in moments of those moments are when whatever happens sticks harder. It's why you could be the best parent in the world, but the only time it really truly matters, or I mean, the other times, please be a good parent, but the time where you truly need to try your damnedest is when something has gone wrong. Whether it be your child made a mistake, breathe. Because remember, what you do will affect this kid for the rest of their lives. Because this is their fundamental years. Think about it this way. It's like a printing machine. It is printing ink. When do you think it is the most time that is going to be affected the most? When it's barely going through in printing. When it's barely going through in printing. Right? So that those fundamental moments when the print is being printed, when the ink is being put onto the paper. So always when a traumatic thing happens, when there is a big thing, whether it is your kid spilled something, there was a huge commotion, whatever it is, remember, keep your calm, because this is the moment that will be engraved in your child's head. They might not always be conscious of this, because they don't always are conscious of this, right? Not always. But remember, that is the moment when it is imprinted in the kid's brain. That is when it will be imprinted. I know damn well there's moments in my brain where I know that was a fundamental moment in my brain. There's certain moments where I could tell, yeah, that's a fundamental moment. There's moments that I could remember vividly when my whole childhood, I can't remember jack shit, right? So think of it that way. Fundamental building years. That is when the base of the tower is being built. And where did Izuku spend most of those years? With a monster. So of course, his healing journey is going to be hard. Because now he has to override all of that. All of that coding. He has to overwrite it. And yes, you can overwrite it. If you made a mistake, if something in your past happened, you can overwrite it. Even if you're 30, right? You can build code on top of it. But it's gonna be hard. And Izuku has gone through so much. And not only was he taught this via trauma and trauma-induced response, he was taught it when he was in his fundamental years. It's going to be a long journey, and I hope you guys strap along because this is not going to be an easy journey for Izuku, nor is it going to be for us reading this. And, I want to cry. Because someone who knows psychology, I know how hard this is for someone who has had to, override, coding that has happened, right? It's hard. I'm still working with it. I'm still dealing with it. It's hard, okay? And I can't even imagine how it is for Izuku here. And some people might call me crazy because I'm crying over a fictional character, but psychologically, my brain, as smart as it is, cannot differ the difference between the pain and mourning of a fictional character and a real-life person. Consciously, I'm aware of it. Subconsciously, my brain is releasing the same chemicals. Like, if a character were to die, your brain is releasing the same chemicals that it would if that were a real person in your life that you deeply cared about. So whenever someone tells you that you crying over a fictional character dying or a fictional character going through trauma and you're feeling really sad for them, tell them that your brain is chemically releasing the exact same chemicals that they would if it were a real person. That the emotions and feelings you are feeling inside are the exact same thing. And no matter what, your brain is going through that same process and is thinking as though someone actually is going through that. Someone in your life actually went through that. So, next time you call me crazy, study up the books, bitch. As always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.